climate change and all, and, is that, no, sorry, here we go. Last month I was at a seminar on sustainable cities, and it had to do a lot with climate change and really a lot about sustainability in terms of not just that, but cities like ours that have a lot of our own services and utilities and all joint in the city for the synergies we have, which was very good. I'll be having a lot of that information, and I'll be able to share some of the presentations which they gave, which they were real good about giving to us. Also, we were at the last NAPC meeting, just that there's some things coming up there, like a home tour. Paraco is doing that. There was a presentation for the Gulf Stream again, and that group is making other presentations around the city, so keep your ears open for different neighborhood associations hosting presentations on that, on the hotel. Congratulating the Webbers for the AWOL event, which was terrific, and we see that going on too. So that's all I have. Keep it short.
Commissioner Marceau?
Upcoming Evening on the Avenues will be coming back, the all-new Evening on the Avenues, the first Friday in September. I'm happy to host a beach cleanup coming up August 30th, 8 a.m. at the Lake Worth Beach. Please come out and join us. I also attended the Florida League of Cities this past weekend. Great things going on with City Tech and also Sea Rise Level. Commissioner McVoy was there with me in that meeting. Just some great things coming down the pipelines, and I look forward to sharing that with staff.
Commissioner McVoy?
I have a little bit that I was going to present from the FLC one, if I could.
Sure.
Which I can do either before or after. So if I can give that to you. I know it's a little cute. It's the cutest flash drive.
Just wait so you can see what she's doing. Don't turn the lights off. She can...
She can't see it close anyway, so
I
it doesn't
know,
matter
it's
if it's light
like-
or not.
Somebody can please talk.
Yeah, go ahead and start. I also attended the Florida League of Cities conference down in Hollywood, and I found it very helpful. It did exactly what one hopes it does. It lets you see what some other cities are doing, compare it with what we know we're doing, and try to learn, you know, the old adage of not trying to reinvent the wheel, learn from what other folks are and see if we can adapt and adopt some of it here. Looks like we might get there.
Yeah. No? Nothing there. That's because,
Do I need to do something here?
no, I need to turn the screen on.
Sometimes be helpful.
Let me put the,
There we go. That looks right.
okay, you should be up and running now.
Looks like the brightness is coming up, and I'll bet this is forward. So it's just, as I mentioned, I did attend that, and I've found a number of things very interesting. In particular,
You may have to turn it back on. I may have just turned it off. On the side?
the one that says on.
Yes.
There we go. What do I aim it at?
Oh, this one.
Is it turned around?
I'm
Maybe
feeling it.
if you don't mind
I don't mind.
just pushing the button there. Whoops, one back.
Technologies in cities conference.
One back, there we go.
Okay.
Two things that particularly caught my attention was future of technology. You can guess, you know, the geeky scientist, amateur experimenter kind of got excited about. It was actually a staff person from Florida League of Cities that was really very on top of a lot of new technologies that I think some of them will, you know, some of them are way out there. I don't imagine that we're all going to be wearing Google glasses anytime soon up here, but you never know. I'll show you in the next one a little bit that was a very cool story. And then, as Commissioner Amoroso mentioned, we both went to the sea level rise and impacts one, and can imagine I was interested in that. Very well attended, I have to say. A lot of interest from cities in South Florida, not too surprisingly. Next, please. And we'll hope that the movie works. I don't know whether it will or not. It did at home, but you never know. This is a cool story. Students volunteering at the University of Central Florida, it's either Central or South, Central Florida, somehow got in touch with a family that had a 5-6-year-old who was born with arm that only extended about mid-upper arm. I don't know how they found out about it, but they did, and they were into 3D printing, which lets you create basically anything you want on a printer. They created an arm for this person. Those fingers function. They didn't have the electronics there with them. They created the whole thing for $350. Pretty amazing. And you know, they had a little video clip of the kid. First thing he did was give a hug to his mother with a functioning arm. It was pretty awesome. Next one might be the movie. I would say try it, but I don't know if it'll work or not. Click it and see if it goes. If not, we'll just go on.
I did.
Okay, then we'll go on. We'll do that. Fort Lauderdale, there's sort of little logo that they had. They gave Nancy Gassman, Dr. Nancy Gassman with the City of Fort Lauderdale, formerly with Broward County, gave an excellent presentation on what Fort Lauderdale is doing on sea level rise. Next, please. They have little cards that they give out all over the city, and that's their logo. We are ready, and particularly I thought of interesting, they're a coastal community. While I was away, one of the things that I started hearing while I was away in July, totally unrelated to this conference, but related to our city, was there's a shift out there of thinking about sustainability, which we all hear about, to thinking about resilience. And I think that's highly appropriate for Lake Worth, is how do you make yourself more resilient in the face of changing conditions? And that's part of our job here as commissioners, to build in, to the extent that we know how, resilience as things change. Let's go on from that. One of the things that they've done is they've prepared a whole series of steps in Fort Lauderdale of involvement of the community, visioning and developing those visions into strategic plans. One of the things they include in is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimate of sea level rise, because as they point out, they're a coastal community. What does the U.S. Corps of Engineers, which is a pretty conservative group, not too wild, and in fact, people that I talk with are already, a little bit concerned that that's an underestimate of what's likely to happen, but at least let's pay attention to that level of information and build that into our planning. Next, please. So they have a whole string of steps that Fort Lauderdale has taken to develop a vision, work on that vision with their community, get community input, and then they go back out and do polls to see how well informed is our community. They're running at about 50% being aware of sea level rise and the implications for their community, which is pretty darn good. And then they took that vision and said, well, that's great, you have a nice vision. How does that turn into a strategic plan that guides what we're going to do over the next stretch? And they've got two ranges of them, 2035 and 2018. They've got sustainability action plans, community building. They're very integrated, as Commissioner Zerdy alluded to, about people, about sustainability and environment, but people, profits, there's a 3 Ps sort of thing that mentality is out there. They're very much on board with that. Next, please. They've laid out very explicitly goals, and there was a lot of additional detail that I cut out, but be a pedestrian-friendly, multimodal city, so diversify your transportation, and be a sustainable and resilient community. And then they're translating that in some of their specific parts to building a sustainable infrastructure, something that as conditions change, and they made a strong point of it's not only the boundary condition of the ocean of sea level rising, but it's also being very well aware that they have had in the last several years 2, what we call in hydrology, 1,000-year floods. Well, you can tell from the name, you're not supposed to have a 1,000-year flood more than once in my lifetime, which is a little up there, 1,000 years. If you're having that kind of return frequency floods, that's because conditions are changing, and that's well known in the climatology world that we are headed to more extreme events. And the significance for us in South Florida is that tends to be higher intensity rainfall. If you get 10 inches of rain over a week, that's what you get, in inland temperate climate, not that big a deal, your systems can deal with it. If you get 10 inches in 2 hours or 1 hour, that's a big deal. And if that starts happening multiple times a year, multiple days in a row, you need to have built that into your planning, which they're doing. Next. And that translates into a whole bunch of concrete details that they're doing in their planning of both roads, stormwater, and particularly stormwater drainage. We're talking about some of these here in Lake Worth, but I think we're not quite as far along as where Fort Lauderdale is. They really are talking concrete things, no pun intended, of how to deal with these changing conditions and building that into their planning. Next. The other thing, a city that I found very interesting, it wasn't a presentation, but I've spent quite a while talking with some of their staff, and they were so knowledgeable about what they were doing in the city that I asked them, are you folks planners? Because it sounded to me like talking to planners who are very in tune with
I'm
it.
sorry to
We're
interrupt.
almost done.
I was just gonna say, okay.
Yep, we're getting it. They were not planners. We then, my girlfriend and I were then out on the, stayed in the evening on Saturday night and wandered around Hollywood. We happened to run into a tent of different people, also with the city, equally informed, very detailed, very knowledgeable about the plans. Complete Streets is part of their, what they're doing. Next, please. They have a commitment in the city to, some of the things that we're all committed to, clean, well-maintained, but really working on the overall well-being and quality of life in their community. Next, please. And Complete Streets is part of that, and there's a little bit of definition. It's something that you can Google and get an idea of. Next. And again, very much detail-oriented. What is a complete street? The top is existing Hollywood Boulevard, the bottom is what they're proposing. Next, please. And you can see, if you want to get the presentation, you can see a lot of detail of how they're dealing with pedestrian, how they're dealing with commercial deliveries to stores, how they're dealing with both public and private transportation and multimodal transportation. Middle of that is walkway. Down the middle, you'll see down there what we need on 6th Avenue, a very explicit crossing area that the drivers can see that tends to make you slow down already, gives some protection to pedestrians trying to get across. Next, please. A little bit more computer renderings of what some of these projects are going to look like. Next one. And here's what really got my attention. By building in guidelines into their planning and explicitly stating the guidelines, they made themselves eligible to get some of their road work helped funded by, in this case, MPO in Broward County, to the tune of almost $7 million. So by building in guidelines and saying, we're committed to this complete streets idea, you get the attention of some of the funding agencies. And you can see some of what's involved in complete streets. Next, please. And so I came back with a sense of how are we doing relative to some of these other cities? How far along are we in terms of setting out a vision for what our community wants to do and turning that into guidelines, turning that into a strategic plan? And I have to say that, I'm concerned. Seeing what other cities in South Florida are doing, I'd like to see us do a lot better. And I think at this point, when we're asking folks for $60 million, we need to have plans that are at least as detailed and at least as strong as what we're seeing from some of these other cities.
Thank you.
So that's some of what I learned.
Vice Mayor?
Good.
You're good? Okay, since since we met last time majorly, I went to Washington DC, and that trip was to basically go and speak with FEMA, and I'm sure you've heard this conversation. I know we've had it before in the past. I know Steve Carr talked about it a while back, from the hurricanes of 2004 and 2005. And FEMA had sent us letters, and we went over this probably about a year or 2 years ago, but pretty much right after I got here, where they were asking for close to $4 million back for, I don't know, for lack of a better word, paperwork, alleged malfunctions, and all kinds of things that happened during the course of that time. And I went to testify before FEMA and to meet with them. I think the meeting went extremely well. I'm very positive and optimistic about how things went. They will be notifying us within less than 90 days right now. That was the last that we left it. But they understood. I'll tell you, it was challenging going up there and doing that. But I felt very confident knowing that the work we've done, and Steve Carr did an amazing job. I happened to be on those phone calls with the state FEMA agencies when we were going back and forth a couple of years ago. And we have sent in appeals in 2012, 2013, and 2014. And they had not processed all of those appeals yet. And the federal head director basically told the state directors to get back in touch with us in 90 days. So I thought that was positive and hopeful. And I felt very confident going in, knowing that the work that staff had done to really, we not only provided it to the best ability that we could during the storms and going through that kind of situation, we also did analysis of our neighboring municipalities and where they stood and how much of a load, you know, that they were dumping off. And it really had mostly to do with about debris removal. And we were right in line, there wasn't any kind of craziness. So I felt very confident going in. They seemed very approachable and understanding. And got to work with our new lobbyists up there in Washington for the first time. They were there, kind of did the setup, and city manager was there and did the timeline of events, and I kind of talked turkey. So it was, like I said, we'll keep you updated on that. While we were up there, of course, you know, I can never miss an opportunity to try to pound the pavement for infrastructure funding. Despite whatever happens next week, as you know, I've been plugging away and every politician is getting tired of hearing from me. But I will not stop. So while I was up there, I met with Congresswoman Lois Frankel, met with Congressman Hastings' office. He was not in. They were actually in session, so some of them were hit and miss. Met with Senator Rubio's staff, met with Senator Nelson, actually, was there, and met with Senator Nelson. I'm trying to think who else. We also met with the Department of Energy, and that was quite an interesting meeting. Main goals of that was to talk about photovoltaic, which is quite interesting. I know we've kind of thrown some things around as to possible locations and things to do with that. We also talked about compressed natural gas, the line that we have out there, and talked about some really interesting ideas. They were very helpful. There's probably about 26 people that came to meet with us in that meeting and threw out a lot of ideas, and also gave us contacts to some local people, well, not exactly in our area, but within the South Florida community or Florida community that are doing some successful programs, and there was a lot of excitement about that. So I'll be working on that and seeing what I can bring back on that. But it was a very successful mission. The most important reason I was up there for a day was FEMA, but we'll keep you posted. Okay? All right. Public participation of non-agenda items and consent